Let me start with a question that might sound a little too close to home. What would you think if your neighbor maxed out 10 credit cards, refinanced his home to buy a boat, took out a loan to pay for his groceries, and then bragged about how the system still trusts him? You'd probably think, that's crazy. That guy needs an intervention. Why do people keep loaning him money? And the shocking part is that neighbor isn't actually your neighbor. You've probably guessed it. I'm talking about your government. I mean, it's our government. And it's not just the United States of America, though we're one of the worst. It's nearly every major economy on earth. We live in a world where debt has become oxygen, invisible, constant, and necessary for survival. But just because something is common doesn't make it healthy. If you're a Christian leader, you're a pastor, an entrepreneur, a parent, you can't afford to ignore what's happening because the same spiritual patterns that lead governments into unsustainable debt are the same ones that lead people, maybe even you, into personal, emotional, and spiritual debt. So let's start by talking about the hidden addiction, and maybe it's not even hidden that much anymore, but governments are addicted to debt. That's not hyperbole, it's reality. Globally, sovereign debt has exploded to levels not seen since World War II. In the United States, our debt to GDP ratio hovers around 120%, meaning we owe more than everything total that we produce in a year. In Japan, the debt to GDP ratio is over 250%. Italy and France, also in the triple digits. We're borrowing to survive. And worse, we're borrowing to pretend that we're thriving. That's the dangerous illusion of prosperity that's built on credit. Now think about your own leadership sphere. How many churches borrow against tomorrow's tithe to fund today's programs? How many small business owners run ads on credit because, well, we need one more good month? How many families buy things they can't afford just to keep up this image of abundance so that the neighbors will think they're wealthier than they actually are? Debt is more than a financial problem. Debt can actually be a symptom of a spiritual condition. In Proverbs 22:7, scripture says plainly, the borrower is servant to the lender. And if you think about it, that verse isn't just about money. In many ways, I think a verse like that is about control. Who owns your peace? Who dictates your future? Who controls whether or not you sleep well at night, right? Who gets to tell you what you have to do next? That's the real cost of debt. It oftentimes trades your future freedom for your present comfort. And that's not a good trade, your future freedom for your present comfort. And we see internationally this cycle of borrowing. And let's talk about that cycle because governments aren't necessarily evil masterminds. They're just human. They borrow to survive, just like many families do. And it kind of makes sense. You can understand the major borrowing when they're hit with a huge financial crisis, something like COVID, or think about during the 2008 financial crisis. Do you remember that one? Governments borrowed trillions of dollars to stabilize their economies. And then came COVID and they borrowed trillions more. And now inflation is eating all the leftovers. What's happening in many ways is quite simple. We borrow to fix the mess created by our earlier borrowing. It's like eating a donut to fix your blood sugar crash that was caused by the donut you ate an hour ago. Every nation now acts like an insurer of last resort. So when trouble hits, the answer is always the same. Spend more, borrow more, stimulate the economy. But every borrowed dollar is a promise that someone, someday, will have to pay it back. And when inflation rises and interest rates spike, that promise gets really expensive. In the US, interest payments alone now cost over $1 trillion a year just to service our debt. That's more than we pay on our military in a year. That's money that could have gone to schools, infrastructure, healthcare, or tax relief for hardworking families. So governments are stuck in a trap of their own making. They can't raise rates without wrecking growth. They can't lower rates without fueling inflation. And they can't stop borrowing without causing panic. Does that sound really familiar to you? Because in many ways, that's the same trap that a lot of leaders fall into life. You keep borrowing time you don't have. You keep spending energy you can't sustain. You keep making promises you can't keep because you feel like it would be abject failure if you stopped doing all these different things that you're doing. Let's talk about the bond vigilantes and where they come in, right? It's maybe one of our favorite phrases in finance, the bond vigilantes, and that's what Wall Street's calling investors who punish reckless governments. If they think a nation's finances are out of control, they demand higher interest rates or they stop lending altogether because ultimately the government is typically borrowing from people in the form of bonds. That happened in the United Kingdom in 2022. Maybe you remember this. The government announced unfunded tax cuts, bond market revolted, yields spiked, the pound collapsed, and the prime minister resigned within weeks. Her name was Liz Truss. She took office on September 6, 2022. Her economic policies led to significant market instability. And whether you thought she was doing the right thing or the wrong thing, the bond market reacted negatively to her proposed tax cuts. And Truss actually resigned on October 20th, 2022, 44 days after taking office. It was one of the shortest tenures in UK history. And in many ways, it was a masterclass in accountability, the kind that no politician wanted, but we all desperately need. Here's where it gets personal. Every Christian leader, in a sense, we need bond vigilantes in our lives, right? People who love you enough to say, hey, you can't keep borrowing peace from tomorrow. You can't keep spending your integrity on applause. You can't keep overpromising because you're scared of disappointing people. You can't live your life for the fear of man. Those voices in our lives are rare, but they're priceless. Hebrews 12 reminds us that God actually disciplines those that he loves, not to shame us, but to keep us from destruction. And sometimes God's discipline comes through friends who tell the truth when no one else will. So here's the question for you. Who are your bond vigilantes? Who are those people who hold you accountable before you crash? You could call inflation the hidden thief. It's very sneaky, right? Inflation is like the silent pickpocket that steals from the poor first. When prices rise, your money buys less. But inflation doesn't just attack your wallet, it also attacks your confidence, right? Secretly, governments kind of like mild inflation. They usually want it to be about 2% because it makes their debt cheaper in real terms. But for the average person, the single mom, the small business owner, the pastor on a modest salary, the school teacher, it's devastating, right? Groceries cost more, rent goes up, retirement feels further away. Isaiah 55 says, why do you spend money on that which is not bread, or your labor on that which does not satisfy? That verse sort of hits different in an inflationary world, doesn't it? We chase more, we spend more, we owe more, and often we end up enjoying it less. Inflation isn't just an economic issue, it's a mirror showing our hunger for control and for comfort. And I want you to see that this debt addiction is a global addiction, not just the US. If we zoom out, the US is not alone. I mean, Japan's debt is sky high. How does Japan survive those rates? Well, it survives because it owes money mostly to its own citizens, and it does keep its rates usually at about zero. Italy and France are barely staying afloat because political paralysis makes reform almost impossible for them. Even in Germany, which has kind of been the fiscal grown-up of Europe, they're now borrowing to rebuild their military and fund infrastructure. So what's the pattern? Even the most disciplined nations eventually cave into the pressure of now. It's the same pattern we see in leadership and family life. You start out disciplined, you tell yourself, we'll save more this year, we'll rest more, we'll spend less, I'll get a good night's sleep, and then a crisis hits, and suddenly you're borrowing again. Maybe not money, maybe you're borrowing peace, maybe you're borrowing time, maybe you're borrowing moral compromise. And every time you do, your internal interest rate goes up. You get more tired, more anxious, more cynical. In many ways, that's what addiction looks like, right? And for government economies, there's this great debate between austerity versus growth. Economists love to argue, should we tighten our belts, austerity, or should we just keep spending money like there's no tomorrow, stimulus? It's a false choice because both can be dangerous without wisdom. If you cut too hard, too quickly, you kill all growth. But if you spend too freely, you breed dependency on the government and you breed inflation, which can have disastrous consequences. The same balance applies to our spiritual and leadership life. You can't save your way to impact by hoarding every resource and fearing every risk. But also, you can't spend your way to fruitfulness by exhausting yourself in the name of productivity. Sustainable leadership, like sustainable economics, means knowing when to plant and when to prune. Ecclesiastes 3 says there's a time to build and a time to tear down. You need both. Some seasons require investment in people and ideas and your time with the Lord and your personal faith. Other seasons require restraint and spending and ambition and ego. Biblical wisdom is knowing the difference. When is it a season for growth? When is it a season for restraint? And let's pull this all together with a kingdom perspective. When Jesus told the parable of the talents, he wasn't against profit. He was against waste. The master didn't condemn the servant who multiplied. He condemned the one who buried what he was given. That's stewardship, right? Multiplying what you've been given, not reckless expansion, not fearful hiding, but faithful growth. The world often measures success by leverage, but Jesus measures it by obedience. So when the world is drowning in debt, financial debt, emotional debt, moral debt, Christian leaders need to model a different way. We're called to live below our means, to give generously, to lead patiently, to trust God's provision rather than human manipulation, because the kingdom economy doesn't run on credit, it runs on grace. And grace is never borrowed, it's given. So what can you do? Let me give you here several practical takeaways that I hope will be very helpful to you. Number one, audit your life. That sounds really weird, but where are you borrowing beyond your means? Is that money? Is it time? Is it energy? Is it approval? Audit your life. Secondly, build margin. Every great steward leaves room for the unexpected. You need margin when it comes to your money, when it comes to your sleep, when it comes to your energy. Build in margin. God can't multiply what you've already consumed. Thirdly, tell the truth early. What do I mean by that? When you are overextended, and that will often happen, don't wait for a collapse. Confess it, adjust it, simplify. Talk to a spouse if you need to. Fourthly, lead by example. I think all four of these are important, but lead by example. Whether you run a business, a ministry, or a household, people are watching you. Show them that freedom is more valuable than flashiness. Don't feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses. So here's my closing challenge for you. While the world chases comfort through credit, you can chase contentment through Christ. When governments panic and markets tremble, remember that God's kingdom is never in debt. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He's never short on provision, but he is looking for stewards that he can trust. Will you be that steward? You can lead differently, spend wisely, save diligently, and most of all, live free in the freedom that Christ provides, because true freedom doesn't come ultimately from financial independence, though that's really nice. True freedom comes from spiritual dependence, depending on the only King whose debt was paid in full and who fully paid our debt on the cross of Calvary. I hope this short video was helpful to you. If so, consider giving it a like or subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much for your time that you've invested in watching it. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day rejoicing in Jesus.